This is Greg Pruitt, formerly of the Cleveland Browns, and you're listening to The Sports Fix.
Sports Fix listeners, like us on Facebook today. Facebook.com/The Sports Fix.
Hey guys, only a few more preseason games to go before the regular season of football kicks off, and you can start the season winning $2 million in Week 1 at DraftKings.com, America's favorite one-week fantasy football site. It's the biggest fantasy football contest ever. $10 million in prizes up for grabs, including $2 million for first place and $1 million for second. 1 week fantasy means no season-long commitments. Play where you want, when you want, with the players you want today. Just pick your players, pile up the points, and pick up your cash. It's that simple. You've never experienced football or fantasy football quite like this. Every game feels like the playoffs, even Week 1. And every broken tackle, every spectacular catch takes you closer to the $2 million grand prize. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code Spreaker to play for free for a shot at $2 million in the Week 1 Millionaire Maker. Enter Spreaker for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. Visit FantasyJocks.com, your fantasy sports superstore. Championship belts, rings, trophies, and more.
Live in Ohio, it's time to get your fix. The Sports Fix.
Boom, there we go, off and running, a live, locked, large, and quite loaded weekend edition of the Sports Fix, getting ready to come here. Well, it's not getting ready, it's not getting ready. There we go with that Catholic school education kicking us off here. It's ready, it's locked, loaded, and on the air, and like I said, loaded is the word here. We've got the sports writer extraordinaire, Jonathan Knight. Matter of fact, JK will be with us. We're not even taking a commercial break. JK will be with us just about 12, 13 minutes from now, jumping in on the conversation. We're going to talk some Browns and roster decisions, a little bit of Indians as well with Jonathan Knight, the sports writer extraordinaire. We've got my man Mike Brandenberry back in the house after a few weeks from DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. Cannot wait to catch up with him. We're going to talk some Tribe. We're going to talk a little Cavaliers news as well. Oh, Tristan Thompson. I can't wait to have a little conversation with Mike Brandenberry. Always a good time. As I said, it's been a few weeks. BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners, 1:30. Well, 90 minutes into the show for those of you listening on digital delay. 1:30 if you're listening live. BJ's in the house. Fantasy Football for Winners. His bold predictions for 2015, draft strategy, and all that heading into the weekend, heading into our draft, your draft, all those things. BJ will be with us as well. We've got JK, Mike Brandenberry, BJ Riddell, you and me, baby, doing the thing. I'm ready if you're ready. Get rolling. Let's, there we go. Get rolling with the Sports Fix, you guys. I am your host, the Big Daddy on the microphone, J-Rocc, Jerry Myers, with you here each time we crack the mic, live, noon, across the Sports Fix radio network. Maybe those of you are listening to us on TuneIn and TuneIn's radio app worldwide, one of my favorite places to catch the show. I mean, really, it is it's spot on. Never a time that you tune in on TuneIn and you can't tune in. So welcome in all of you on TuneIn. Those of you live on our friends at Spreaker, Spreaker.com. Mixler, their respective digital and mobile apps as well. My man Bruce over there in the chat room. Those of you listening live on our website, the home base, if you will, thesportsfix.net. Bookmark that if you haven't. It's your one-stop shop for everything Cleveland sports and Sports Fix, thesportsfix.net as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't welcome in all of you, the thousands who listen daily around the world, 24/7 on digital delay, on sites such as iHeartRadio, the world's largest internet radio provider, on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, and SoundCloud, and CarPlay, and all of the different places that you podcast us, feed us, subscribe, whether you listen live or on delay, however you get your fix. Thank you guys so much for doing just that each and every time we are able to be on the air. And I'll tell you what, speaking of getting your fix, phones are going to be loaded today. We've got 3 guests on the slate when they're open, or anytime if you want to leave your take on the hotline. The phone number is 216-539-7535. 216-539-7535. Facebook and Twitter, 24/7 ways to stay in touch. Hit us up, facebook.com/thesportsfix. Make sure you like the page while you're there. Join the over 20,000 fans and followers of the Sports Fix on Facebook. As well, tweet with us at The Sports Fix CLE. You can email us, thesportsfix@aol.com, facebook.com/The Sports Fix, Twitter at The Sports Fix CLE. Email us, thesportsfix@aol.com. And man, it's a Friday. It's a beautiful Friday. It's the 1st of September here for us to be on the air, and we've cracked another month. Man, September, you can just smell it in the air. It's football on all levels. I've said this a few times in the last few weeks. College football got rolling yesterday. I know a lot of you had some fun. I talked to a few of you watching some of those kickoff games. And, of course, quite enjoyable when Michigan starts off the new era, the same as the old one. That school up north going down south in the opener. As college football kicks off, of course, Bucks up on the other end of the holiday weekend here, kicking it off on Monday down in Blacksburg, looking for revenge from last year. Friday Night Lights High School. Speaking of high school, tonight, I'm on the air. I don't just have a football game. I've got the football game of the night. St. Ignatius, Menor fighting Cardinals, 2 of the best teams in the area, going at it tonight at the JTO out in Menor. I will be on the call with my friend Arnie Hamilton for 1330 WINT. You guys can listen to it on the radio dial if you're here in Northeast Ohio, 1330 AM. On the internet, you can listen on TuneIn. Many of you listen to this show on TuneIn the same way. There's a channel dial right there for 1330 WINT, or you can stream it directly off the station's website, WINTradio.com. But if you're a Northeast Ohio football fan or just football, this is one to listen to tonight. St. Ignatius and Menor. Matter of fact, then I'm going to follow Mentor next Friday down to Cincinnati. They're taking on another big state powerhouse, Cincinnati St. Xavier. Menor with a couple of really tough early season challenges for them. That's going to be a lot of fun tonight. Iggy and Menor, early on playoff style football in the second week of the high school football season. And then, of course, finally, I think maybe some other people might I don't know if the entire slate is done, but if it's done for us, preseason. We can get that dirty word out of your mouth. The most overrated, overhyped, biggest ripoff part of professional sports. And you guys know I don't mince words when it comes to preseason football, especially. I mean, that thing last night. And at that point, I mean, you get it. You want to just get out of there. You want to get out of there healthy, but it leads to a situation like last night where you've got the just most boring, mind-numbingly awful football. It's not even football that you can call it there, what you were watching last night. I mean, I get it. We were all looking for the same few things, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, and that is who locked up some roster spots, who's going to go, because tomorrow 20 cats are getting locked off this top of the roster, and as Bruce says there, they'll go back to selling cars and bagging groceries. So, and that's no disrespect, but that's a lot of what you saw yesterday, and that's basically the entire function of that week 4 of the preseason, and much of the preseason, really, in the NFL. But that dirty word is done, because it's now regular season time. 9 days from today, the regular season will kick off for the Browns, and they got the Jets, and we got football that actually matters here coming up. We're going to talk about that. In fact, when JK joins us, I'll get more into the Browns and the roster and who you think stays or goes. I'll tell you what, I was just kind of looking over some of these bubble spots, and it's funny, too, because I talked to some of you guys before the show, and again, I'm going to wait for JK to dive into too much of this, but wide receivers, a position that pretty much every Browns fan, every media, anybody will identify as a position of weakness, especially heading into this season for the Cleveland Browns, and they did some things to address it. What I find funny is that the names that keep popping up at people going, hey, this guy should get cut, this guy should get cut, that's the position that it all kind of circles around. I mean, a position that was already up in flux has even more questions surrounding it. Me personally, I'll tell you what, looking at the receivers that could make this, and at the top, of course, you can talk about Terrell Pryor, and you can talk about Dwayne Bowe. I can give you 9 million reasons why Dwayne Bowe's at least going to start the season. on the roster. Now, I will agree that he is a bubble guy to me, and I can see him. Dan Wismar compared him earlier this week to Ben Tate last year, and I could see mid-season the tide turning against Dwayne Bowe going forward with this team. But I do think that $9 million commitment is enough to say, let's see what happens. But I would say it's safe to say that there's nothing encouraging about what we've seen from Dwayne Bowe. Terrell Pryor also most likely going to make this roster, I would think, and not just because of his ability, or what they say is his ability to play wide receiver, because his injury has really limited any ability of us to see that. But the fact that they can monkey around and move him in some different positions, and you saw a little bit of that last night with him moving around and running the ball out of the shotgun position, that is probably going to be the thing that gets him an opportunity to start the season with this team, especially. And here's a tricky question. If the Browns go forward with two quarterbacks like most teams do nowadays, because it's hard to expend a roster spot. Number one, you do have an emergency in Pryor as your third quarterback, so that saves a spot. But the Manziel question kind of brings that up too, because I'm telling you, all is not clear in that camp at all, and that's going to leave you really wide open. What if he can't go? What if he's not able to be your backup 100%? You're going to have to put a third quarterback, and that opens up a whole new set of questions. We'll get into that in a little bit. Lens, too. Good one, Bruce, because I was looking at the bottom of those wide receivers. I got to tell you, as much as some people are in the corner of seeing more out of Marlon Moore, and I like what I've seen from him. He's got some punt return skills. He's got some receiver skills. But I'll tell you what, Lens, to me, showed he earned a spot on this team. And I don't know if he's going to make the numbers game, but the fact that he could also double as a defensive back in a pinch, I mean, you never know when you get 2-3 guys going down in the same game. All of a sudden, you're down there to the, hey, who can get in here and take some snaps? That shows some versatility. If you're going to apply it to Terrell Pryor, apply it to Josh Lenz too, because that guy has an opportunity, I think, to help this team. And plus, he was the best receiver of the guys that were on the field last night. And there's more positions. Again, I don't want to dive too much because JK will be with us literally just 2 or 3 minutes from now. So we're going to get into that. Another thing I want to talk to him about, and I'll just mention it real quick while we're talking football, Tom Brady. Since last time we talked, of course, Tom Brady's 4-game suspension, for those of you that didn't hear it, wiped off the books, and now the NFL is in the appealing seat, as now they've switched seats with Tom Brady there. But I was at the Ohio Center for Broadcasting yesterday doing some teaching, and that when they came in with the to me, and again, there's a whole conversation that we can get into. You guys know where I was all winter long on the Tom Brady thing. I thought it was the whole thing was ridiculous to me, that the conversation, and I am in the camp of those that say I don't believe that the man cheated, and I don't believe that he was in on any attempt to cheat. And I'm sorry, man. The whole deflated football. I'm not doing this rant again. But anyways, apparently somebody agreed with that, because Tom Brady will be back on the field to start this season, pending an appeal coming back the other way. But when so many people along the way, all of the quote-unquote experts said, oh, Tom Brady's just going to negotiate a settlement here, they're going to work out a 1 or 2 game suspension and save face for everybody. I'm just going to say this. I've seen a lot of guys fight. And then you know what? You can throw a guy like Lance Armstrong back at me. There's a guy that fought to the end before he had to give it up. But I'll tell you what, Tom Brady, it's the same hubris of a guy like Lance Armstrong. Maybe I'm way off base. Maybe Tom Brady was slipping C notes to the guys left and right. Hey, juice those footballs or unjuice those footballs. I don't believe it. I've made that very clear all along, and apparently somebody else doesn't believe it either. But anyways, what do you think about that? Hit me up, you guys, along the social media, Facebook and Twitter, at the Sports Fix CLE. What do you think about Tom Brady and his suspension being up? I'm curious what Jonathan Knight thinks about that here. He's going to join us in just a minute. We're going to talk some Browns roster as well. Also, a lot more to get into. I'll talk to you guys. We've got 1 open spot remaining in the Sports Fix Fantasy Football Challenge, brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. I'll tell you guys how you can get in. There is 1 spot remaining. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I'm going to get right to the phone lines, and we'll just kind of continue right along where we started as soon as the phone lines want to cooperate with me. My man, the sports writer extraordinaire, Jonathan Knight, with us here every Friday, well, at least when we're able to make it happen. It's been a couple of weeks, and he's back with us today. Jonathan Knight, sports writer extraordinaire. My man, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, Jerry, and yourself?
Hey, I'm fantastic, man. I'm here. We've got a lot to get into, a lot to talk about, and the preseason is over, which makes your day better just automatically because at least you don't have to sit through that. Last night, I used the word mind-numbingly awful. I think I may have needed a stronger one than that because, boy, that is a test of being a fan of a team to sit through that last night. That's for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's a term you're going to have to dust off several more times before this is over. But yes, I think last night was mind-numbingly awful. Yes, I think that's a pretty apt description of what everyone witnessed last night.
I mean, really. I mean, not just the preseason being the function of what it is anyway, but the fourth preseason where everybody's just trying to get out of it and not lose anybody. I mean, we've seen all preseason long teams have lost big. I mean, Jordy Nelson goes down for the season. I mean, teams have had their whole season changed. So, I mean, I get it. But at the same time, you still have to go through it. And, boy, you end up with something like that beautiful exhibition that we saw there last night. And it does leave some questions, though. I mean, I guess we could kind of start there with the Browns because by the time you and I talk again, the season will be getting ready to kick off. But tomorrow, over the weekend, they've got to drop about 20 guys off of this roster. And I think, obviously, you know, most of the positions you're settled. But I'm curious your thoughts. I was talking about the wide receivers. I was joking that, you know, with that being the biggest weakness coming in and all of that for the Browns, every name that fans are throwing at me for the Browns to cut is all the wide receivers. I'm like, man, you want them to have no wide receivers left on the roster. But, I mean, I don't think Dwayne Bowe goes because I said just a minute before you called. I mean, he will get at least half of this season to see if he's worth any of that money that they guaranteed him. But I can see a Ben Tate situation halfway through the year happening with him. But Terrell Pryor, his versatility keeps him. But when you look at a guy like Lenz, and I know some people will go, well, that's just the training camp flavor of the month. I think when you're looking at them bottom receivers, I think he showed more than a guy like Marlon Moore. And, hell, I was impressed with his ability to go in there and play some defensive back in a pinch, just in case, you know. I mean, in today's era of roster versatility, I think that's more important. We have a lot of guys that can return punts, and that's Marlon Moore's other strength, you know. So I would have a spot on my squad for Lenz. What do you think? It's funny that you're right that a lot of the positions that people are talking about of guys that are going to get cut or receiver when they have no talent at wide receiver. That's what the funny thing. Like, you need all the help you can get. It's strange that people are talking as if the Browns have this wealth of talent at wide receiver that it's going to be hard to make the team, and they've got players they can cut and they've got room to spare. And the opposite is true. You know, they are incredibly thin at wide receiver. So I don't know. I don't know who you would really point to as, okay, clearly these are the leaders of this squad. I mean, this is the receiver position in particular is quite bad. But, yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised by anything. The only thing I would be surprised by, at least a receiver, in terms of who the Browns cut, I would be stunned if they cut Terrell. If he's able to this team, and I don't know, but there's just no, I can't see from the Browns' perspective, there's no downside. I mean, he brings, like you mentioned, that versatility that I'm sure people are excited about. They know there are downsides, to be sure. One, that he clearly cannot stay healthy. I mean, there's no way he's going to make it through a season, but there's no downside. And the biggest upside, of course, is the novelty of having the former Ohio State player to remind Clevelanders of the real pro football team in Ohio, and then bringing back memories of everything he did with the Buckeyes. So, yeah, I mean, there's really no – this is the equivalent of the Indians having a bobblehead. And this is the Browns' equivalent of a bobblehead. You bring Terrell Pryor, you have him stand on the sideline, you have him run about 3 plays every week, and then you send him back to the locker room. He'll make the team. Oh, that's awful. You're awful, man. But I hear you. I hear you. He's like Josh Cribbs, only from Ohio State instead of Kent State.
Yes, it's very similar. Very similar. I don't think he's as good as Cribbs, honestly. I don't think he has the versatility. I don't think he's probably not as good an overall athlete as Cribbs, and I think he'll contribute far less. And of course, as you mentioned, can't really stay in the channel. Maybe that's another reason why they keep him. It's like, well, you know, the fans, if they've had enough to get Cribbs, they Cribbs himself.
You know what, too? Going back to what I was saying about Josh Lenz. You know, the other guy who I would give him a roster spot over is Vince Mailey. I know he's a draft pick, and we took him in the 4th round and all that, but you picked the wrong wide receiver. I think that he's shown he has no ability to get separation in the NFL, and I'm not saying that a guy, to me, we're talking about guys on the bubble. I don't care if you drafted him or not. That's a guy that if I'm basing it off of the preseason, he doesn't have a spot on my team over Josh Lenz at wide receiver.
I can't counter with that, honestly. I have nothing to go. Like I said, I really have no opinion about this batch of very, at best, mediocre players. Like, I can't get excited about them. I have no faith in any of them. I really don't. Anything the Browns do, who they keep or who they cut. I mean, these are like generic players in like Tecmo Bowl or something, like nameless little figurines that are going to ride out onto the field. I just have nothing. There's been nothing I have seen. There's nothing I have heard that indicates to me, wow, yeah, okay, I'm excited about this guy. I think this guy is I just don't see it. Which isn't to say that none of them could potentially turn into a genuine player. I have not seen anything. I don't see any inkling that any of these guys are going to emerge into what the Browns think that they could be. This is a desolate position for the Browns, and they're unfortunately not the only desolate position. But boy, it's just hard to imagine any of these guys making any kind of real contributions to this team this year. Maybe one or two of them are a year or two away, but boy, yeah, this year, in addition to all the other problems they're going to have on offense, that there's just nobody out there who an opposing defense would really need to worry about. That's something they need to worry about.
Oh, and I hear you. To me, the wide receivers on this roster that are even going to have effective seasons this year is very limited. I do think Brian Hartline is going to surprise people. I think that he actually will be more like the reverse. Like, you know, when they signed Hartline and Bo, at least more people were like, well, Bo did have a big season, but everybody kind of looked past Hartline, and I'm the opposite. I do believe that he'll be perhaps the most professional wide receiver that the Browns have had at that position in a while, but it's still one guy, and it's one guy
right.
that can run for the sticks. That's what I like about him. He can hit the sticks. He'll get you to the first down marker. He's a Joe Juravicious type. He's a, you know what I mean? I see him as like a Brian Brennan type of wide receiver. You know, he'll dig out the first downs. He'll keep your drives moving. I do think that Hartline is going to be a pleasant surprise. I like Hawkins, and I think he'll contribute, but he's one of those short in stature wide receivers that the Browns just have a whole bunch of, and that's part of the problem, you know, and I'm with you. I think one or two wide receivers will have decent seasons, with Hartline being the leading one. All the others, I'm with you. I see a bunch of guys I told my son last night, he goes, what do you think Bo's going to do? I said, 20, maybe 30 catches for the season, and I'm just saying that's if he stays healthy and doesn't get cut. Because Dan Wismar said it the other day. He goes, what was the guy, Ben Tate? I said, yeah, I could totally see a situation like that where halfway through the season, you know, Dwayne Bowe has said, hey, it just didn't work out. The only reason that would stop that is because they committed $9 million to him. But, hey, they just showed with Phil Taylor that they will eat money, at least. What do you think about that? Is that different to you than, I don't know. What is your thought on that? On like letting a guy like Phil Taylor go with $5 million on the books? I mean, is it better to keep him because you owed him money, or does it make you feel better about the Browns that they let him go and they still owed him? I'm just curious.
I think people are reading too much into it. I think that as much as they want to say, well, they're sending a message to no, I don't think this is how you. I don't think that is a message. I don't think this is how you send a message. You know, you send a message by winning games, by creating a winning culture. This kind of stuff doesn't send a message, or if it does, it's quickly forgotten. It's really not a big deal. It was startling. I don't think anyone really expected this. It is surprising. And in a way, well, my problem with it is this, and not to say that I wanted to keep him, or that I was excited about having him on the team, or that he was going to be great, any of it. My problem is that I feel like every year, every other year, basically we see this. What we're seeing is the current Browns front office trying to prove how much smarter they are than the previous front office, and that's what this is. We have seen this time and again. We saw it with Trent Richardson. We saw it with Tim Couch. We saw it down the line. We say that when a new front office comes in, one of the things they really want to do is plant their own flag. And there's the two big ways you do that is by when you start drafting your own guys, you draft your own players and put your stock in the guys that you have drafted. But the secondary way you do that is by pointing out that all these guys you inherited are just not your type of guys and not guys you would have drafted, and that the previous regime had no idea what it was doing. That's what this feels like. This feels like, I mean, you cannot tell me that Phil Taylor couldn't have provided something. I mean, that's just preposterous. Why would you give up on a guy when again, similar to the wide receiver debate, it's not like they're loaded with talent at any position, but that one in particular. You can't tell me he couldn't have contributed. Would it have been worth what he's getting paid? Probably not, but that makes him like 20 other guys on the team who are not going to contribute worth what they're getting paid. So if you're talking about sending a message, it's that. They're not sending a message to the players. They're sending a message to the fans, to the media, to the rest of the NFL, trying to make a point of just how smart they are and just how stupid the last guys were.
You know, I mean, that's got to be a point. Because you talk about, paying him, is he going to be worth it if he stayed? And to me, you're paying him and now he's not going to play at all. My thought on that is...
You're paying him anyway, exactly. I mean, that's what I think is getting lost in this.
And I'm curious to see what happens with Phil Taylor from here, because I want to see if the reason for that is physical. And I mean, again, I think that he can still play. If not, then I understand. If he really did, if you didn't have faith that he's going to be back, maybe there's more to the medicals that we don't know about that led them to believe. I don't know, but I'm with you. I tend to believe that there was still some gas left in the tank, even though you did draft the replacement, and I'm all about seeing Danny Shelton play, but it's hard-pressed for me to believe there isn't room somewhere if you're still paying him. Now, if you cut Phil Taylor not to pay him, that's a different story. But if you're still paying him, there's some curiosity in there. And you bring up the previous regime. This ties right perfectly into it. I'm sure you thought I was going to get into this at some point, but let's go back a few years to the Julio Jones trade and look at that, because I think you and I may have been talking about that 4 years ago or whatever. When we early in our relationship on the Sports Fix, and they made the big haul, and at the time the argument was that the Browns had so many holes to fill that even though having a guy like Julio Jones would have been an impact wide receiver, they got a fullback, a wide receiver, a defensive lineman, a quarterback. They got all of these positions covered, and look at all these guys, and then look at how that panned out. They got Owen Marisic, who is not in the NFL, Greg Little, who is the butt of any joke if he does show back up in the NFL. I don't even think he's playing this year, but he may be. I could be wrong. I don't know if Greg Little made a roster or not. Phil Taylor, who was just now released, which now makes him the final cog in that one, and Brandon Weeden, who, I don't know, is he even still backing up Romo in Dallas, I think? But either way, all four of those guys gone, and Julio Jones is still catching passes down in Atlanta.
Yeah, and that is the most discouraging part of this. So whatever you feel about Phil Taylor or what he would or wouldn't have done for the Browns this year, just the fact that it completes that bingo card. It connects four, because they're four. You just slid that fourth checker down that basically underlines that these Browns, the previous regime, and all indications this current regime has done the exact same thing, cannot draft. And the more they try to make things better, the worse it gets. Because you're right. All they needed to do, it was a slam dunk decision. They were in a place where it's like, well, Julio Jones is right here. We're right here. Let's just take him. There was no thought that was required. A 12-year-old could have made that pick. But again, the Browns these front offices have to prove how smart they are. It's less about building a team and proving how smart they are. We saw it with Banner Lombardi. Now we're seeing it with Farmer and Truck Stop Jimmy. We're just seeing these guys want to prove how smart they are. So they can't just, no, let's not do what everyone expects us to do. We need to wheel and deal and make these deals and get volume players and get players on a pallet load and get 4 players for the price of 1. And so what you wind up with doing is you watch Julio Jones go on to this perennial Pro Bowl career while you get 4 big empty sacks of wet cement. Just unbelievable. Now, if you want a silver lining to that, Julio Jones would not be putting up the type of numbers in Cleveland with 4 different quarterbacks in 4 years that he's doing in Atlanta. So you got to temper that right now. I mean, it works. He's in a great system. He's in a great stadium. I mean, everything, that's the perfect environment for him. So obviously he's better there than he would be here. There's an argument to be made that he wouldn't have worked out in Cleveland. Who knows? I mean, why? Whether Josh Gordon, whether Greg Little, look at the receivers who have come here and their careers have just ended. And maybe it would have been the same with Julio Jones. Who knows? It's so much of it, and that's what the Browns fans struggle with so much, is they keep thinking, oh, if we just get this one guy, we're just one good draft pick away. Like, no, you're not. It doesn't. You could put Peyton Manning, you could put Tom Brady, you could put anybody in this system and they will fail. The system and this culture of this franchise is so terrible, is so pathetic that they are beyond one franchise player, two franchise players, three franchise players. You could drop them all into this system and they will fail. The culture, the foundation is so terrible, it's going to take years for them to fix this, and it's not going to be fixed by one player. I don't know how you fix it, obviously. I'm not going to claim that I do, but they're not one player away. So as much as we'd like to think, oh, if they'd have just taken Julio Jones, we'd be talking about going to the playoffs. No, probably not, because they still would have had 4 quarterbacks in 4 years, 5 quarterbacks in 5 years, and have many of the same problems they have today.
Speaking of that, everything you just said, it could be summed up in you say quarterbacks and being smarter than everybody else and knowing better. Meanwhile, do you know how many fans hit me up at the end of last season and said, if it wasn't for Brian Hoyer, boy, what the Browns could have done. And I'm just saying, you know how many people told me that he'll never play, he'll never start, hey, Cleveland, it was just a hometown thing. Meanwhile, we've got Josh McCown and Johnny One-Arm Manziel getting ready to start the season at quarterback. And Brian, no-go Hoyer somehow found a way to manipulate his way into a starting position in another hometown. Wait, he's not from Houston. How did he do that? I don't even know. He didn't have the hometown thing going for him, but somehow he made the starting spot down there too.
See, and that's another example of what they just did with Phil Taylor. That's an example of, well, Hoyer's not our guy. We didn't bring him in, therefore we got to get rid of him. They just ignore whatever benefits he could have brought. Because, again, you cannot tell me that Brian Hoyer wouldn't have been at least as good as Josh McCown, at least as good as the one-armed Cabbage Patch Kid. There's no way that Brian Hoyer would not have done at least that well, this year. There's no chance. You cannot convince me of that. So, so that's another example. We can do it. You can basically do it just about every single season, or certainly every season where a new regime is coming in or just getting on their feet, where they take a player who was Phil Dawson. There's another one, Gerard Warren. There's another one. And I'm not saying these guys are talented or needed to stay, but they're trying to prove a point, and they're dusting off a high draft pick or a player that was beloved by the fans or embraced by the fans or whatever. Just say, well, he's not our guy. We're going to do better than this. Hoyer's example, and now Phil Taylor joins the club.
Hey, he's not a Cabbage Patch Kid, that guy. He's a Garbage Pail Kid. But anyways, man.
Garbage Pail Kid. I like that better.
Everything that you just said there, man, I hear you. And you know what is a shame is to tie this up. I've been saying this all preseason, and I really do believe this, is I believe that the Browns defense is going to be much like the Indians pitching staff was for most of this season. They're going to be good. They're going to be in the top part of the league. They're going to keep this team. The Browns are going to lose a whole bunch of games in the fourth quarter, in the final drive, much like you've seen them do over the years. I think you're going to see a season of games like Indianapolis last year, only without the offense. I'm talking about you're winning 13-10 in the fourth quarter. You know what I mean? You're winning 10-7, and you give up that long drive at the end, and you lose. And they're going to lose a ton of 14-10, 14-7 games late in the fourth quarter. But I do believe that this defense is legit, especially the starting level of it. I think that is one thing that fans will enjoy watching on the Browns this year. What do you think?
Well, I hope you're right. I don't have that much faith in the defense. I think I do feel a little better about the defense than I do the offense, certainly. I think really the only part of the team that I feel good about is the offensive line. I mean, other than that, I can't point to a part of the team that they're like, yeah, okay, they're pretty solid there. I mean, the line is solid, and maybe that will help atone for what they don't have in terms of running backs. And I think we've seen that before, that the offensive lines kind of rise up and can make other parts of the team look better than they actually are. Maybe it'll help McCown a little bit, and will help him give that extra second to find these receivers that he doesn't actually have. So I mean, if there's one area that you want to be good, I guess it would be that. If you can only pick one, maybe that's the one. because it has such an impact on the rest of the offense and then thereby on the defense. But I don't know. I don't really have a good feel for the defense. I think we really need to see them in live action. But I think your analysis was right on the money. I mean, gosh, even if the Browns are close, I almost said Indians there because I was going with the pitching staff for example. But I think even if they are able to stay close, which is plausible, there will be a lot of games that they're going to lose in the fourth quarter, in the second half. I think you'll see a lot of games where they're competitive in the first half and either taking a lead or they're right there going into the second half of the fourth quarter and just cannot maintain. They cannot close it out. We saw that late last year, that since 1999. If there's one recurring trend, and there are a few, but I think one of them is that this team, whoever the coach is, whatever players on the field, they just have trouble finishing games. Very, very rarely do they take a lead into the fourth quarter in a close game and then hang on to that lead and win a game. So, yeah, if there's going to be an Achilles heel, there it is.
With roster cuts this week, last question about the Browns. I don't think they will, but would you, if either of these names come available, which I think they both will, RG3, Tim Tebow, wouldn't you take either of those guys over what we have now, even if you don't think those guys are that good?
Oh, sure. I mean, especially RG3. I mean, that's to me that would be stunning. I cannot believe again that and I'm sure there's financial issues and whatever else behind the scenes, but I just can't believe that you wouldn't hang on to him. That you think he is that far gone that he can provide nothing, even if he's not your starting quarterback. That you don't keep him and use him in some other fashion. That just blows my mind. So yeah, sure. If RG3 comes along, absolutely. But there again, I don't know if maybe the Browns don't. Because remember how much in love they were with him when they had the opportunity to draft. They went almost pedal to the metal to try and get him, the previous regime. And now this regime, they're like, well, yeah, but if we do this, we'll admit that they were right, and we don't want to do that. So let's just take a pass. So once again, they're cutting off the nose to spite their face when, of course, he will be better than what the Browns have now with quarterback, even if he only plays 4 games. That's 4 games of decent quarterback play that you're not going to get. So I would love to see RG. Tebow's another story. Tebow is basically, if you take Johnny Manziel and you put a bicycle pump in his mouth and you pump it 4 times, that you get Tim Tebow. I mean, it's basically the same dude, just 6 inches taller. So I don't know if I'm not as excited about Tebow, but RG3, I would absolutely take that flyer.
Especially if you can get him for a 4th-round pick. Oh, I'd take that all day long.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. What do you have to lose?
You were going to give up half your future. Well, they would have screwed all those picks up anyway, even if they.
Then they would have screwed exactly. Right.
But still, look, now you can get him for nothing. I would definitely look into taking a flyer on that. JK, I know you got a roll. We didn't really talk about the Tribe, but you did on your article this week for didthetribewinlastnight.com. Mike Brandenberry's coming on with us next, and I'm pretty sure that you wrote about the same thing that he's been talking with us about here anyway, about how this strong end of the season, the danger of it leading into an off season of nothing again for the Indians. Talk a little bit about your article.
Yeah, and Mike can absolutely fill in for me and talk more about this because I know he and I are both of like minds on this subject. But what we've seen here these last couple of weeks is people are excited about it, and people have, foolishly begun to talk about the Indians. Well, this is their run. Like, no, it really isn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to see them playing well, and the ultimate goal for me, I'd love to see them get back to 500 before this is over. We've been saying this since May. Just get to 500.
Right,
just get to 500. They've never gotten there. So that's still, to me, that is the primary goal. I can't see that. Whatever. But yes, I think the danger here is, and we've seen this before. It's not an annual tradition, but the Indians have had a history in the last 10 to 15 years where they'll do this. They'll play miserably for 5 months. And a lot of times it's in some of these 90-loss seasons that we saw in the 2000s there. They'll just have a miserable 4 or 5 months, and then they'll turn it on. They'll figure it out in September, and for any number of reasons that the article goes into, that it really is fool's gold. I mean, it is a mirage, what you're looking at. The Indians, and more specifically, a lot of the individual players and performances that you're seeing in September are nowhere near as good as they appear to be. And then that thwarts your view and thwarts your preparation for the next year. You think, well, yeah, he finished strong. He'll pick up where he left off, and Carlos Santana will be 260 next year instead of the 220 he hit for 5 months. Like, no, that's not how this works. So it is sort of a dangerous time, and there is sort of a dark side, a double-edged sword to playing well in September. It's great. You know, we pick winning baseball anytime we can get it, but there is that downside to playing well at the wrong time of the year.
JK, I got to end you on something positive. Do the Buckeyes win Monday?
Please.
Do they get some revenge?
Oh, yeah.
Buckeyes, baby.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, yes. I was thinking or saying earlier today that you talk about the Browns finishing up their preseason schedule. Ohio State begins its 12-game exhibition schedule on Monday night, because they're going to roll Monday night. They are going to roll through this entire regular season. Honestly, probably roll straight through the Big Ten championship game into the college football playoff. This team is loaded. It's a great team. Ohio State fans are going to love it. They are loaded. Clearly the best team in college football. And, unfortunately, for them and I think for the fans, as much as nice as that is, they're just not going to be challenged. They are just not going to be challenged at all in the regular season. And I'm not saying that's going to be a detriment when they get to the playoff. I don't know that matters. They really weren't challenged that strongly last year anyway, and that obviously didn't make a difference. But, just in terms of entertainment value, it would be nice when you have a team this good, it would be nice to see them have 2 or 3 games that's like you really get up for, where you're going against top 5, top 10 talent, and that's just not going to happen. This is, honestly, Monday night at Virginia Tech, that might be one of their top 2, maybe, toughest games of the year. There's nothing there. This team is there's such a disproportionate it's so out of balance between how good this team is and the schedule that they're playing that it really is discouraging. But it'll be fun for Ohio State fans. They're gonna run the table very, very easily, starting with Monday night.
It's going to be like the way people talked about Kentucky last year, in college basketball.
Well,
very
true.
similar,
right.
Just a wealth of
and they
talent.
did. To be fair, it's a much harder road to get to the national championship in basketball than it is in football. But Kentucky did. That's what we're looking at. The regular season for Ohio State will be very similar to what we saw with Kentucky. Only, if you keep in mind, Kentucky did have some narrow wins along the way, where I think it's much harder to win on the road in some of those environments in college basketball than college football. But there again, Ohio State, I think 8 of their 12 games are at home. They're only going to play 4 or 5 road games, and none of them in terribly hostile environments. You point to Michigan, but as we saw last night, Michigan is a good 2 or 3 years away from being anything resembling what everyone expects them to be. So there's just not. It's going to be very similar. It'll be interesting to see how it does play out compared to what everyone saw or expected with Kentucky last year. I think that'll be an interesting 2 parallels to compare and contrast the two as the season goes on.
Oh, I agree. I can't wait. It starts on Monday for the Buckeyes. This is going to be a lot of fun this year. It's going to be a very special season down in Columbus. Jonathan Knight, sports writer extraordinaire. Latest is on with didthetryWinLastNight.com. Of course, also writing for EverybodyHatesCleveland.com, and they can tweet with you at JKnightWriter on Twitter. JK, anything else going on before we roll?
No, I'll be up there next weekend for a book signing, but I'll shoot you the details next week. It should be a lot of fun.
All right, definitely. We'll talk about that next week. JK, have a great weekend. Enjoy college football kicking off and the Buckeyes on Monday.
Yes, indeed. Looking forward to it, buddy.
You got it. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you next week. That's my man, the sports writer extraordinaire, Jonathan Knight. We're going to take a break. Speaking of breaking Indians news here. Corey Kluber, hamstring issue. Scratched from his start tonight. We'll talk about that. Talk some Indians. Talk some Tristan Thompson and more with Mike Brandenberry from didthetryWinLastNight.com. My man Mike joins us next after the news. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on the Sports Fix.
Get your fix.
Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got to do.
It's the Sports Fix. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, before we go to the break, I want to talk to you a little bit again about our good friends at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted, the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championships, some of the hottest fights in the world today. Each and every one of their huge events Harry Buffalo is one of the few places in Northeast Ohio you can go there and watch each and every UFC fight at the Harry Buffalo. And let me tell you, I've been there. The people are out the door. They are to the rafters. It is one of the craziest environments for some UFC fights. Wing Mondays, they've got great deals on wings and drinks, and every day of the week there's a different special, a different deal. And don't forget the Bison Burger, the unbelievable. It is the combination of a fantastic burger and eating healthy combined into one unbelievable sandwich. You have got to get a Bison Burger while you're there. So whatever you're looking for, whatever day of the week, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sundays, there's something for you at the Harry Buffalo North Olmsted, just outside Great Northern Mall. Check them out today. Harry Buffalo, join the herd.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Fantasy sports lovers, you put so much time, hard work, and effort into playing week to week that it quickly stops being a fantasy and starts getting real. And when the smoke clears, you want to show off those victories with a real prize.
I mean, a really real prize.
Nobody does that like Fantasy Jocks. The crew over at Fantasy Jocks have beautiful, high-quality, and heavy-duty championship belts, rings, trophies, and so much more for all your fantasy sports needs. There's literally only one place to go. FantasyJocks.com. Sports Fix listeners, do you tweet? So do we. So tweet with us 24/7 at the Sports Fix CLE. Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Harry Buffalo. Harry Buffalo, join the herd.
Good morning, I'm Bob Picozzi. It's tough to get much attention when you play in the same conference as Ohio State. The defending national champion Buckeyes are unanimous preseason number one. Big Ten brethren Michigan State opens its season tonight. The fifth-ranked Spartans will visit Western Michigan, 7 Eastern Time on ESPNU. South Carolina began last night with a 17-13 neutral site win over North Carolina in Charlotte. Sophomore quarterback Connor Mitch completed only 9 of 22 passes in his first career start for Coach Steve Spurrier's Gamecocks.
He did okay. We didn't have a lot of guys open, I don't think. They had a good plan for us. Fortunately, Brandon Wiles made 2 first downs. And if we can do that this year, we'll be better off than we were last year, put it that way.
Mitch left in the fourth quarter with a hip injury. Houston's Colin McHugh tries to become the American League's third 15-game winner tonight. His Astros begin a 3-game series with the Twins. Serena Williams resumes her pursuit of a 4th straight U.S. Open title tonight against Bethany Maddox-Sands, 7 Eastern Time on ESPN2. Live third-round coverage begins at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. First round of the Deutsche Bank Championship. Jason Day, 3 under through 4 holes, leads by 1.
Hilton.com gives you unbeatable prices on hotels across the U.S. So when your team travels, you can too. Scream your heart out and then sleep your face off. Unbeatable prices on 12 unbeatable hotel brands. Only on Hilton.com.
Hey Cleveland, this is Mo Williams and you're listening to Sports Fix.
Being on some chill, we go 0 to 100 go real quick. They be on that rap to pay the bill. And I don't feel that shit, not even a little bit. Oh, Lord, know yourself, know your worth. My actions being
Welcome back to the Sports Fix Live. J-Rocc back with you here, rolling on, getting ready to hit hour 2, getting cross over to the other side. My man Mike Brandenberry going to join us. Jonathan Knight, sports with us in the last segment. Coming up next, hey, we'll backsell and forward BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners, and I will let you know how you can get in. We have one spot. I've been holding it out on purpose. Going to give one more opportunity for people to get into the Sports Fix Fantasy Football Challenge brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. We'll talk about that next segment. We're going to talk some Indians. As I mentioned before the break, Corey Kluber scratched from his start tonight as the Indians take on the Tigers. They start 27 of 28 in the division here to wind down the season. We'll talk some Indians. We'll talk a little Cavs, too, with my man Mike Brandenberry from DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. You guys can keep the conversation rolling 24/7. Facebook.com/TheSportsFix. Tweet with us at TheSportsFixCLE. Email me, thesportsfix@AOL.com. Mike Brandenberry, my man, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well. How are you? I feel like it's been forever and a day since we talked, man.
It has. I was mentioning that at the beginning of the show. It's at least been a few weeks, and, I hate that. I can't stand going that long, although the Indians,
the last time we talked, the Indians were dead in the water, and Mark Shapiro was the team president. I mean,
Look how much has changed. Look at how much has changed, and actually, there's a ton to dive into right there. Let's talk some Indians. I mean, you want to talk about the team first? We can, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Shapiro before we get into that. You've obviously had some great interviews and some chats with him over the years. Talk to me a bit about what you think is the whole dynamic with this and how things perhaps change going forward, because Dan Wismar and I were talking earlier in the week, and that old adage just kept coming out, be careful what you wish for, because at some point you get it and then you find out if it was really what you want. I'm very curious to see the next few years on both sides for Mark Shapiro, how he does elsewhere, because say what you will, and perhaps the head of the snake is the top that gets the blame, but at the end of the day, I do believe there's something to be said for some of the things that man did too. Where are you at with his tenure with the Tribe and the dynamic of him leaving and how it went down?
I think where I'm at with his tenure with the Tribe is where a lot of people are. And I wrote a story at the beginning of this week that was called Meh on Mark Shapiro moving to Toronto. And that's really kind of how I feel about a lot of it. I'll get to the one part that really I kind of scratch my head about in a minute. But as far as his tenure, I would never come on here, and I think, there are people who think that he's one of the finest executives in all of baseball. I would not come on and say that, nor would I ever try to tell you that I think the guy is awful and I have no idea how he ever pulled a paycheck. I mean, I think he has done a nice job over the years. I think he is far from perfect. If we were just passing out school letter grades, I guess I would probably give him a C+ or a B. But, he's certainly made gigantic, what I would consider to be gigantic mistakes. In his time as general manager, for most of his tenure as GM, they were the worst drafting team in baseball. I don't think that can be anything other than a gigantic black mark. On the flip side, I think he was fantastic at making trades. I think he was fantastic at finding when a team was maybe at that uncomfortable point where he could take advantage of them. The trade that he made that I think in a lot of ways he's hung his hat on and rode the coattails of for getting close to 15 years now is, when he traded Bartolo Colon to the Expos for Grady Sizemore and Cliff Lee and Brandon Phillips. I think that's a fantastic trade that that a lot of teams wouldn't have made, but Mark Shapiro, I've heard people say in the past, well, Mark Shapiro took advantage of them because they were trying to save their franchise. Well, that's absolutely true, but he did it before 28 other teams could. So, right. He's got to get credit for that too. I think he did a lot of positive. I also think he did a lot of negative too. And I could fill a show in both. Some of the things that he has done over the years that annoy me, Chris Antonetti still does. I think is a foundational, is an organizational belief that they buy into that, me as a fan probably necessarily doesn't. So, as far as what do I think is going to change with the Indians, I'll be honest, from everything I took out of the press conference from the Dolans and from Mark Shapiro and the comments that Terry Francona and Chris Antonetti have both made in the last week or so, I think as far as what the general fan sees on the field and how the roster is built and those things, I don't think anything is going to change. I mean, I'm sure there will be, organizational changes behind the scenes at Progressive Field and who's in charge of what responsibility. But as far as building the 25 and the 40-man roster and the amount of payroll that's available and those things, I don't think anything is going to change. I mean, Terry Francona hasn't said point blank, I am returning. I am not going to opt out of my contract. He's come close, but he hasn't said that. But I think he's given every indication that that's probably the route he's going. And provided that happens, I mean, I don't think anything's going to change. And I mean, if you're looking for change, I guess that's disappointing. And if you want things to remain the way they've been, I mean, I guess you can sleep easy because I just don't see a big change.
I agree with that part. And that was what I was telling Dan the other day was one of my biggest problems with this, because I'm kind of in the base with you. I'm really more on the plus side. That grade was right about where I would grade him out. And I know some people are like, oh, what about that? I get it. Like you said, there's tarnishes on the resume too. I also qualify what I say about Mark Shapiro in I believe that he did, especially in the last 10 years or so, did his job the way his bosses wanted him to go about doing his job, which you can read into that however you want. And that's when I say I'm very curious when he's in a very starkly contrasted situation. I'm curious to see if he sinks or swims, because that could answer some questions too. And I get it. I mean, look, everybody's got to do their own thing. But at the end of the day, I do believe that a lot of the decisions the Indians made were obviously dictated by the organizational philosophy, and I mean financially as well as baseball grounded. So I'm curious to see where that goes, but I'm definitely not. I don't think he was the greatest. He was far from the worst. But my biggest problem is what was said right after, like you just said. When Dolan steps up and says, hey, we're not even going to – I'm going to do most of his job, and it's going to be business as usual. And it's – because my thought was, if you're going to shake something up, and I do believe in stability, but I also believe that it creates sometimes an error without accountability. So if this change was going to happen, I was hoping, and I don't mean somebody to come in from the outside and blow the walls down like the big bad wolf and tear everything down, but I wanted somebody, even if they're not the man in charge, if they're just a part of the conversation, somebody from the outside with a different a different mindset, a different belief than the group think that the Indians have, because I just think that sometimes you get settled into a place where everybody thinks exactly the same and feels the same and gets into a comfort level. And the Indians had a chance to perhaps shake that up and get a new voice in the room, and they show no interest in that, which is why I feel like what you said, it's going to be business as usual for the Tribe.
Yeah, I agree. As it was kind of unfolding, it's been like a month since I've been on. So had we been doing this every week, I'm sure you would have asked me, do I want to see him stay or go? What's my gut rooting for? And I would have told you then that I would be fine if he stayed, but in my gut, I would actually like him to go, not because I'm like anti-Mark Shapiro, but I'm right there with you, Jerry, in that I would love a new voice or some kind of different look at the way things are conducted at Progressive Field. And I feel just like you said, the voice has been the same for a long time, and stability is a good thing, but eventually, I mean, just keeping the guys in place because they've always been there isn't always reason enough. And I'm right there with you. I'm not advocating for blowing the front office sky high or anything like that. But someone from the outside and a new look. And I think, no better of an example to that than, I mean, look at what the Indians did for managers for 10, 15 years. I mean, even if you want to lump in Mike Hargrove, but just draw the line from after Mike Hargrove until Terry Francona. They were all guys who had never had managerial experience at the big league level. This was all their first job, their first attempt. And they brought in a veteran, experienced manager. And look at the message, look at the attitude and the change when Terry Francona came in. I mean, I think a similar type of change, a new voice, just, someone different at the table to bring up some new ideas, some new perspective, I think would be fantastic. And yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm disappointed that it sounds like, they're so quick to reassure everyone that nothing was going to change and everything would be okay. I wanted to jump through my TV as I was listening and be like, hey, whoa, let's think about things before we say this. A little change wouldn't hurt anybody. But I agree with you. I think the part that I'm most intrigued about, Jerry, and I don't know, you almost seem like you were dancing around it or getting close to the same thought that I have. But my question in Mark Shapiro taking this job, and I feel like this is a question we don't have an answer to now, but if we play this show in 3 years or 5 years, when we play this, we'll be like, it's so obvious what the answer is. We should have known or we should have seen it. But my question is, why now for Mark Shapiro? Because if you look at the history of Mark Shapiro's tenure in Cleveland, I mean, this isn't his stock highest moment. It's not his lowest either. But if this was a guy that wanted to head for greener pastures, I'm sure he's going to get paid more money in Toronto. People only take new jobs for a couple of reasons, and money's one of them. So I'm sure he's getting more money. He has had complete and total control of the Cleveland Indians. I don't know that he can be handed more control. The Dolans have been very, very happy to give him the keys to the castle. So I don't know that he can have more. What's that?
I think you're hitting. I think you're.
I don't think
right on
I don't
it.
think
I think he knows
have more. He can't have more control or more power than what he has
than what he had here in Cleveland, right? I think that he knows more than we knows. If you knows what I'm saying,
I absolutely agree, and that's where I was going, and I'll even personalize it. Think about yourself, and I hope your listeners do too. Mark Shapiro has kids that are 13 and 11 years old, and I'm not saying that they aren't going to spend a lot of time in Toronto. But his wife is from here. His kids are from here. Cleveland, Ohio, and Northeast Ohio is the only thing they've ever known. They're enrolled in school here. I don't know the Shapiros directly. No one has told me this, but common sense tells me that they're probably going to remain residents here, and their kids are probably going to continue to go to school here. So Mark Shapiro is going to go to Toronto and work there while his family continues to live in the Cleveland area. That's not uncommon in the sports world, but it is uncommon for him. He's had those opportunities before. I would have to think he's been offered jobs before. They've had those phone calls to see about his interest, and he's said no. And I just think with kids and a family that are at 13 and 11, it's easier no matter what your walk of life is. I think if you have kids, that's, entering the teenager zone, that's the toughest time to uproot your family. If you move your kids when you're younger, they don't know any better. And if you move your kids when they're older, they're more open to some change. But, talk to some teenagers for a while. They're not very open-minded and interested in change, just as a general population. So I find it very interesting to make this move and make it now, because I think he could have made it, he could have made it in 07 or 08 or 09, and his stock was higher then. His kids were younger. It's an easier move. So my great question, which I think you gave the best answer because I completely agree with you. My question is why now? And going back to the part where I said he has complete power here. if there's anyone that knows every single thing and knows all of the truth about the Cleveland Indians, it's Mark Shapiro, and he knows something's coming. That's the only reason that he would leave.
Think about this, Mike. Think about it. Everything that you just said is okay. Monday, when the news came out, when Dan and I were talking about this, I said, Dan, what have I been saying for months? And people are laughing at me like I'm just speculating and don't know business. I said the Indians, all summer long, all winter, all the changes, everything, every move they make strikes me as a business cleaning up its books, improving its assets, and limiting its liabilities so that they can prepare to sell to a new owner. And I talked about that all summer. And so Monday, when we were talking about this, I said, Dan, there's no coincidence to me that at the same time this news comes out, now the Indians admit that they're seeking minority investors. And Dan and I were joking. I'm like, what they're looking for, if that's the case, is somebody to give them a bunch of money to spend, because who comes into the Cleveland Indians that are supposedly not making any money as a minority investor? It's not that great of a vanity project to say you own a piece of the Cleveland Indians, So I'm telling you, man, as you said, there's nobody that knows more about every rehab, every renovation in that building, every change, every concession deal, and why they've all happened. And for this to happen now, for it to happen when it did, for it to come out mid-season, all of those things, let alone when, as you said, he was in better opportunities before, there is no doubt in my mind there's not just smoke. There's a dead fire going on somewhere, and he knows that if he wanted to control his personal situation, he needed to leave Cleveland now because there's going to be some changes on the horizon.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think, maybe they are looking for minority ownership, and like you said, being a minority owner isn't necessarily the grandest thing. You're basically just handing your money over to someone else, but
right.
There are people that want to be owners. And in order to get to the head table, you got to buy in small somewhere. Essentially that's what Jimmy Haslam did to eventually, be able to purchase the Browns. So there may be truth in just the minority part. There may also, be some truth in maybe it's minority and they don't want to say that, for the right buyer, the franchise is for sale. Or, option 3, again, Mark Shapiro knows everything, good, bad, and indifferent about the Cleveland Indians. Maybe he knows that the Indians are leaking oil more than the Dolans even want to admit. If you got a house and it's starting to get old and the roof's getting bad, but it's your house, you'll live in denial as to how bad your house is for a while. Your next door neighbor knows that it's a hole and it ought to be condemned. Well, maybe Mark Shapiro realizes, the state of the Cleveland Indians and their finances maybe are worse than what anyone knows. And the Dolans think they can turn it around. And Shapiro says, I don't want to be here anymore if it doesn't, So he knows that, maybe now is his best time to go. But I am completely convinced that, 3 or 5 years from now, we'll have a clear answer as to why in 2015, after 24 years working for this organization, in the span of a month, he was good to go.
And let me ask you something. Else. This is something that we can't answer now, and that maybe we can't answer for a while, but, talk about things, somebody that would know everything. Maybe it's not the ownership that's going to change. Maybe it's one of the 2 words in Cleveland Indians that perhaps is. There's a lot of people that have talked about what's going to happen if things don't get better when those lease dates come around. What is the date that the
2023. It's 20 years. It's a 30-year lease.
So that's 8 years from now, man. And I'm just saying, there's a lot of things in play, but I just believe that there is way more to this than simply, especially the mid-season aspect of it. You know what I mean? And where it came. Because if you're making that move, you prepare the organization for it, and you do your interviews in the off season. You know, you see how the process usually works. And think about it, Mike. If you and I have a family, and we both do, and we're like him, and those ages are close to my kids anyway. In the middle of, you definitely think out those decisions. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of interesting pieces at play. And as you said, we won't be able to know this for perhaps years from now. But I think that everything we're talking about is fair game as far as what could really be going on. And you know what? Let's go back to the Indians real quick off of that, because we've got a few minutes left. You guys are listening to the Sports Fix. J-Rocc and Mike Brandenberry talking some Tribe. We were talking Mark Shapiro heading up to Toronto, and the Indians with Detroit heading to town. I got this while I'm on the air, so I'm kind of catching up. Corey Kluber scratched from his start tonight. Do you know what the deal is with that?
No, I didn't know until you were bringing me on the air. I was eating lunch before I called you, and you broke the news to me. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Bruce just sent me the word. It looks like a right hamstring issue. He's going to be scratched, and so now that's several of the top pitchers for the Indians. They're dealing with stuff. I do believe that he said Salazar as well. That changes the lineup for this weekend. Yes, Salazar was banged up the other day. Carrasco's been down. Now the weekend starters have been rearranged. A right hamstring strain for Kluber has him out tonight. It's going to be Tomlin starting tonight for the Indians. Salazar is going to go tomorrow, and Sunday is still to be determined, but it looks like it'll be Cody Anderson, perhaps, the guy that's up on Sunday.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's a streak of bad luck that the Indians have had, which is very possible. I mean, if you think about it, for the most part, their top four guys have really been fortunate to be completely injury-free until this point. It may just, be the numbers catching up with them, the law of averages that says you're going to have some guys have some bumps along the way in a 6-month season. Or I don't know if secretly, even with this nice little winning streak and good August that they've had, that in their heart of hearts they know that it's probably still a pipe dream to make the playoffs, and they're better off to err on the side of caution with these guys than try and burn them out and take a shot at it again next year.
Let me jump in there real quick, Mike, because I know where we've been. You and I have talked about this over and over here. But since the last time we talked, to me, it's a little bit more than just a hot stretch that the Indians have had. They've really felt, and I think we talked about this last time, it was at the beginning of this, like a different team. And I'm just curious. I do believe that the hole that they dug, very, very big and probably too big to overcome. But I feel like the way they've played, it's a little less like just a hot run and more like, boy, if they'd only perhaps been composed this way from the beginning of the season, it'd be amazing what would have happened. I know I remember some guys, like the guy on the phone with me, talking about why wait until July to bring up Lindor when he's ready to help you now. But do you feel that way about the Tribe at all? I know you don't want to fool yourself into going into another off season of doing nothing, but they just feel like a different team and much more like the team that you hope they could be, and like a team that can at least continue to play well down the stretch.
Yeah, I do. You said like about 5 things in there that I completely agree with. I kind of feel like this season you could almost break it into thirds, and the first third of the season was their absolute thud, crash, and burn to start the year, where they played very, very bad baseball. They're the definition of poor defense and poor hitting, with good starting pitching being wasted. And then the second third was where they started to make changes, which would really be, bringing up Urshela and Lindor, as they started to definitely moving Michael Bourne out of the leadoff spot and eventually not playing on a regular basis. Those, would be some big moves in that area. And I think the final third part of the season has been since the trade deadline. And I mean, I think there are guys that are still a part of this organization that were referred to on that closed door meeting about guys not hustling and about guys not playing hard all the time. But I also think that the guys that aren't here were guys that they were talking to too. And I don't think it's an accident that some of those guys were dealt. And I think that changes the attitude, changes the direction. And on top of it, they've brought in some guys. I don't know how else to say it other than, they've brought some guys in that are thirsty. And I'll be the first to admit, when they brought Lonnie Chisenhall up, I was like, roll of eyes, and here we go again. That guy's had, more second chances than anybody I know. But I would have to think, if you're Lonnie Chisenhall, when you get that phone call that you're going back to Cleveland and you're going to play right field, first of all, he wasn't sent down because of his defense. He played some pretty poor defense over the years at third base, but he was actually having a pretty good defensive season at third base. He was sent to Columbus this year because he couldn't hit. And he's been as streaky as anybody at the plate. And the same as I said about Carlos Carrasco a year ago, that guy's going to have to do it for more than 6 weeks or a couple months to prove to me that he's really found it. Now, he looks rather consistent, but, he's fooled me before, Jerry, so he's going to have to do it a lot longer to get me to buy in forever on Lonnie Chisenhall. But I think they have some guys like him who have to know he's getting near the end of the line. If not now, then when? Or he's going to be out of a job. And a guy like Abraham Almonte, I mean, he's on his fourth organization in the last 4 years. It's time. Prove yourself, or he's going to become, the definition of a 4A player who's going to kind of just bounce around and fill out AAA lineups for teams. So I think, and there's positives and negatives to that, because, those guys can play well for a couple months and fool you into believing that they've found it, or they really can find it. You have to, kind of decide which side of the coin they're going to be on. But I think there's a totally different attitude and way they go about things today than they did in April and May. And, not to lump everyone together, but I think that's an entire organizational thing, and possibly getting back to needing a new voice. I'm so tired, and I know I've talked about this, ad nauseum before, but I'm so tired of being told to relax in April and May as they play awful baseball and be told that it's early. I mean, to me, today is a prime example to say those games count and they matter. And the fact that they played like garbage until Memorial Day is exactly why it is a pipe dream that they're not a playoff team, because the way they play today, they're playing good, inspired baseball. They're playing at a playoff level, especially in an American League that really kind of looks like there's only about 4 teams that really want to make the playoffs, and everybody else seems to kind of be falling on top of themselves. But you can't throw the first 40 games away and say, oh, well, it's early and we've got hot late before, it'll all work out. Well, it didn't work out last year when you tried that formula, and it's not working out this year. And, for all those reasons, kind of, back to the Carrasco and Chisenhall analogy, they're going to have to show me, not tell me, that this team has found it. And they can tell me all winter about how well they played in August and September, but they're going to have to show me in April and May before I believe it.
And I understand all of that. However, April, May, June, July, August, all in the books. Last question for you. I'm just curious. Well, last time we talked, there were 8 teams between the Indians and the wild card, and they were 12 games out of the wild card. 30 games left in the season, 3 teams between them, 6 games back. Does that feel different, though, than looking at it 2 months ago? Because regardless of how they've played for 5 months, the way they're playing now, to me, not likely, but not insurmountable as well, the situation that they're in. What do you think?
I mean, the way the American League is set this year, and with the second wild card, I mean, everybody's in it, Jerry. I mean, to me, your 3 division leaders, Houston and Kansas City and Toronto, they all really want to be in it. And I think the Yankees really want to be in it. But after that, I mean, there's a group of, and you can put the Indians in it. There's a group of like 4 or 5 more teams that are pretenders. And, one of them is going to win the competition for the last wild card spot because rules dictate that 5 teams from the American League make the playoffs. So, I mean, it's possible, but I mean, if you're asking me, you want me to throw a percentage on it, Fangraphs listed at 30%. I'd say that's pretty accurate. I mean, no one's ever going to make the playoffs with a record below 500, and the Indians haven't been over 500 since late in April. So, I'll seriously entertain playoffs when they hit 500.
I'm with you. We'll talk about that some more next week, my friend, and I know you've got to get rolling. What do you guys got going on? Did the Tribe win last night? Anything good this week?
No, I don't know if he talked about it, but JK just posted a story this morning about the Indians and their September prowess. And, we'll continue to look at the team and especially some of the new guys that are giving that little jolt there.
Check it out. DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. We were talking about it earlier. Jonathan Knight, Mike Brandenberry. Mike, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the Tribe here coming back home. We'll catch up next Friday.
Sounds good, my man. Thanks for having me.
You got it. He's Mike. As I said, the website, bookmark it. It's one of the best Indians websites out there. It's DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. And you can tweet with Mike anytime at DidTribeWin, at DidTribeWin on Twitter. Jonathan Knight, as we mentioned earlier, just dropped his latest piece for DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. Make sure you check that out today. As we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, Corey Kluber scratched for tonight's start. He was going to head out on the mound against the Tigers. It's going to be Josh Tomlin as Kluber down with a strained right hamstring. Unsure how long he's going to be out. Could be 1 or 2 starts here missed by Kluber. Josh Tomlin, who's looked good since he came back, even though he's never met a home run that he didn't fall in love with. I mean, he'd give up some home runs, but he's one of those guys that as long as he keeps them single and keeps the rest of the game in check, you can live with it. But on his bad days, everybody's hitting moonshots. But anyways, Tomlin's been, 3-1, 3.08 ERA since he came back. He is going out there 1 day short. Was he at 4 days rest here? And he's looked well since he came back from that early season shoulder surgery. We'll look at the whole series, and we'll preview the Indians and the Tigers, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit before we go off the air. We're going to take our final break of the day and get set, come back with B.J. Riddell, author of Fantasy Football for Winners. We're going to talk about draft strategy heading into most people's drafts. I know I've got a big draft on Sunday, and our Sports Fix draft is on Tuesday. And many of you ask, hey, man, J-Rocc, how can I play? How can I win the championship belt from FantasyJocks.com? Well, we've kept 1 spot open this weekend. Last chance for you to say, hey, J-Rocc, I want to play some fantasy football. You could get in the Sports Fix Fantasy Football Challenge. I'll tell you all about that when we come back. We'll talk to B.J. Riddell. We'll set the stage for the Indians. We'll talk all the things happening this weekend and more when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Still plenty of Sports Fix coming up next, baby.
Here's what we call our golden rule. Have faith in you and the things you do. You won't go wrong. Oh no, this is our family jewel. We are family. Sing it to me. I got all my sisters ready. Sing it to me. We are family. I can hear you guys.
And now, a very special announcement from the Sports Fix.
Black bears weigh between 200 and 500 pounds.
Brown bears weigh between 300 and over 1,000 pounds. Black bears run away from you. Brown bears run at you. When attacked by a bear, simply lie still on the ground and cover your face and head with your hands. When the bear is finished batting you around and mauling you, contact the U.S. Forest Service.
And that was a message from the Sports Fix.
Guys, want to take just a second as we head into this break and remind you about the official business printing source of the Sports Fix, our friends at Signs and Ship. Signs and Ship, I'm telling you, Chris and Pam, they've taken care of me since day one, and they can do the same for you. Whether you're a small business that's already been established and you're looking to grow to that next level and expand your business, or perhaps you've got an idea that you just know is going to be a great business and you need to figure out how to brand it and how to promote it and put it out there, Signs and Ship is the place for you. If you need a logo, they can create one for you. They have a fantastic graphic designer. Business cards, signs, banners, yard signs, mobile advertising, anything you can think of that you need to promote your business, they've got it at Signs and Ship. The best thing about them, too, is each of their locations, whether it's the home base here in Elyria, Ohio that I work with, or their spots in Virginia, Florida, and Pennsylvania, it's all local sourced. Very important to me because we all understand that small business is the lifeblood of the community. So check them out, signsandship.com, or call Chris and Pam today, 440-323-6060, the home office in Elyria, Ohio. Signs and Ship, quality printing at affordable prices.
It's the Sports Fix. We'll be right back.
Fantasy sports lovers, you put so much time, hard work, and effort into playing week to week that it quickly stops being a fantasy and starts getting real. Real time spent making real decisions, creating real victory.
I'm the greatest man in the world!
And when the smoke clears, you want to show off those victories with a real prize.
I mean, a really real prize.
Nobody does that like Fantasy Jocks. The crew over at Fantasy Jocks have beautiful, high-quality, and heavy-duty championship belts, rings, trophies, and so much more for all your fantasy sports needs.
The trophy's 12 feet high, and it is glorious!
Football, baseball, hoops, you name it, they have it. Plus, they have awesome draft kits and party supplies to make all your preseason activities the envy of everyone. If your league needs a ring, belt, or trophy, or you want to upgrade what you already have, there's literally only one place to go. If you're going to be a fantasy jock, do it right.
It's mine, the most magnificent belt ever created, and it's mine.
With America's fantasy sports superstore, fantasyjocks.com.
What's your fantasy?
No football? No problem at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted. From their awesome Wing Mondays to every single Cavaliers and Buckeye Hoops games in full HD.
Kyrie split the D, goes inside, teardrops it home right down Euclid. That's way up in there for two.
The excitement never stops. Every day of the week brings a different set of food and amazing drink specials.
And now,
fans, Harry Buffalo North Olmsted is the home for every UFC pay-per-view live on the big screens.
Let's get it all!
And let's not forget their mouth-watering trademark, the Bison Burger.
They sure are good.
Nobody does bison like Harry Buffalo. The perfect combination of healthy and delicious.
Hey there, eat up, y'all. You's as good church-going folk. Y'all deserve a little treat.
What are you waiting for? Get to Harry Buffalo, just outside Great Northern Mall today. Harry Buffalo. Join the herd.
This is head coach Gary Waters at Cleveland State, and you're listening to the Sports Fix.
I don't know about you guys, Sports Fix audience, but every time I hear that, I take a deep breath and exhale, because I know that cut right there means that we're hitting the stretch, the home stretch, the final segment. We know that coming up next, it's the weekend, baby, and another week in the books as we crossed over the calendar into the month of September. Football is with us all over the place. High school, college, pros, finally done with that god-awful preseason for the Browns last night. Just god-awful preseason in general, not just for the Browns. I am the biggest dis fan, I guess, word you're looking for, anti-fan of preseason football. But tonight, hey, speaking of football, high school, Friday Night Lights, I'll tell you more about it in a minute, but I've got the game of the week. I'm calling Ignatius and Menor. Can't wait to tell you about that and how you can hear it in a minute. Speaking of telling you about things, first off, welcome back in. Phone lines 216-539-7535 all weekend long. Give us a call. Facebook.com/TheSportsFix. Twitter @TheSportsFixCLE. Fantasy football. BJ Riddell. Fantasy football for winners. The segment's coming up next, but Fantasy Challenge, the Sports Fix Fantasy Challenge, brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. We've kept one spot open, and we're going to fill it over the weekend and set it up on Monday. One more chance for you to get in free of charge. It costs you nothing. We'll talk about the league all season long, and the winner is going to walk away with a brand new custom championship belt from our friends at fantasyjocks.com. It's fun all season long. The draft is Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, September 8th. Live, 8 o'clock p.m. online. You can do it from your phone, from your device, from your house, anywhere. It'll be a great opportunity to sit down, and we always wait until the last minute for the draft because I like to make sure, hey, things like you never know who's getting cut, who's getting hurt, who's moving where. So Tuesday night's our draft. All you've got to do if you want to get in, send us a message on Facebook, on Twitter, or email us. Say, hey, J-Rocc, I want to get that final spot, and we'll pick one of you to get the final slot in the Sports Fix Fantasy Challenge. It's that easy. It's free. Hit us up, Facebook, Twitter, email. Let me know you want in, and we'll set the final roster for things on Monday. Speaking of final rosters, when you're getting your fantasy rosters together, my man BJ Riddell is going to tell you which way to go. We're going to talk about his bold predictions here for the season, some draft strategy, as this weekend, most of you, if you haven't drafted, will be doing that here. So let's get our guru on the phone, my man BJ Riddell, author and host here with us every week, Fantasy Football for Winners. BJ, how you doing this afternoon?
Great, J-Rocc. How you doing?
Fantastic. Glad to have you with us here, and I'm glad to have the preseason in the books, man. I don't know about you, but I can't stand preseason football. Go ahead.
A lot of people are not fans of preseason games. The only people who are pretty much are the ones who are battling for, roster spots and try to move up the depth chart. But most of the guys there who have any fantasy relevance are just very happy that if they got out of this unscathed, because there's way too many big injuries that occurred, and now we can get on to the games that matter.
For sure, and all the things that matter. It starts, of course, with building your team and a fantasy draft, as we talked about strategy. I want to talk about that a little bit with you, and then I want to get into some of your bold predictions here for this season. But for a newbie here to fantasy football, or perhaps somebody that's not that experienced, talk to me about some of your basic beliefs in your strategy when it comes to drafting your fantasy football team.
Well, the first thing is with drafting, you want to go with the flow. You don't want to go into it saying, all right, I'm going to take a running back in the first round, a running back in the second. The reason that doesn't work, let's say you have the fourth pick in a standard league. Yeah, maybe you take a running back with the first pick. Maybe you reach a little bit for C.J. Anderson. If someone like Eddie Lacy happens to fall to you, or if you believe in Jamal Charles this year, of course, you go for it. But you have no idea with the 19th pick, whatever you're going to have coming back down, depending on the size of your league. You can't just say, all right, I'm going to take a running back, because you don't know. If the people before you, if 13 running backs are off the board, that's a lot different than if 10 running backs are off the board. You got to size up where the highest value is by position, and not just predetermine that you're going to take certain guys. And the second big thing is along those lines is you want to make sure that you're starting runs, you're not ending runs. So if there's a run on quarterbacks in the 8th round, and you see you see Matt Ryan go, you see Ryan Tannehill go, don't sit there when it gets to you after 4 or 5 quarterbacks are off the board that round and say, oh, I better take a quarterback because there seems to be a run. It's the wrong attitude. You gotta jump in at that point and say, who is the highest ranked tight end or the highest ranked running back who's not been taken, highest ranked on my draft board. You don't want to look at any of these expert sites because they don't necessarily know who the highest ranked are. You want to do your own research and figure out who at this point do I really want to take to make sure that I'm getting the maximum value on this pick and I'm not just going with the flow.
You and I've talked about that before over the years with the starting the run, and you can see that, especially when you look back to your drafts. You can actually see, even go back to last year, whatever league you were in, you can kind of see that, even if it wasn't intentionally done by somebody, you can see how that happens all the time. And I'm with you too about going with the flow. To me, that's just such a key, is not staying locked in on whatever, a certain thing. And if you go, so many people try to balance the position. They go, well, I've got my 2 wide receivers. Now I've got to get a running back. I've got to get a tight end. Hey, if you end up with the top four of the top 6 wide receivers in your first 4 picks, hey, so be it. I mean, that's not going to happen. But you know what I'm saying?
Right,
so be
right.
it. You'll have no problem finding a market to move those players. You know what I mean? You'll have no problem filling that up. And that's something that I think people don't look at, is exactly like you said. Don't force it. Go with what's there. And then you can fix your roster later if you're deficient somewhere, because you'll have plenty of assets to work with.
That's right. The roster you end up with by week 14 when you start the fantasy playoffs will look a lot different, more often than not, than the roster you got before week 1. I mean, the title I won a couple of years ago, I basically had nobody left. I may have had 2 players left out of the 14 guys I drafted because I made about 50 pickups and drops, and I made about a dozen trades. And that's not because I wasn't happy with my draft. There's opportunity to capitalize. So you always know, look, if you end up with 6 running backs, in the draft, and those running backs happen to have great upside, and you can capitalize when that upside hits, to parlay that into better value at another position. That's the key. Like Josh Robinson's a good example. I've been pushing Josh Robinson, the running back for the Colts, for 2 months on my blog. Josh Robinson wasn't even on anyone's radar, rated, off the chart, not rated, essentially, NR on all the rankings. No one thought anything of Josh Robinson. And I was looking at it and saying, look, Frank Gore's 32. I don't believe he's a great bet. He might be an okay bet. I don't think he's a great bet to be healthy the whole season. And I don't think he's a great bet to rush for, more than 200 carries, because the whole reason the Colts brought him in was to make sure that they had a good running back for the playoffs. Colts might have won the Super Bowl last year if they had a good running game. But Ahmad Bradshaw got hurt. Herron got hurt. They didn't have anyone left over. So they're not there to run Gore into the ground. They're there to make sure Gore's going to be there for the playoffs. So that means that very capable that Josh Robinson is going to start some games this year. I'm betting that Josh Robinson is going to be a change of pace back to the tune of 8 to 12 carries at some point this season. And if you can parlay, some great game that he has in week 9, where let's say he runs 12 times for 70 yards and a touchdown, and you can pawn him off on someone for, a number 3 caliber receiver to put in your flex spot, that's what I'm talking about. It's the high upside guys that you've got to focus on, not just the high floor guys, because the high floor guys don't impress me. It's the guys who have the most maximum value.
And, we talked about that before, trying to, and I always look to at least one draft pick that I take has nothing to do with right now, with the first half of the season, anything. And I always try to get 1 or 2 guys that I think are going to help out in week 10, week 12, whatever. And we've talked about that in years past. I think that's so important, and it's hard because you've obviously got to make sure that it doesn't hurt you in the short run. And there's so many times that you get pinched with the numbers games, and I'll end up making the wrong move, and you'll let go of a guy that you were holding on to, and a few weeks later you go, damn, I was right about that guy all along, So you've got to hold on too. You've got to hold on until week 10, week 12, whatever.
That's right. If you've got the bench space to do it, if you can survive the bye weeks, you got to hold on and believe in your research. If your research shows that someone's going to be a high upside guy, be patient with it. Don't just give up on him on week 1, unless your roster is so messed up by that point that you really don't have a choice, and then you have to make some tough calls. But hopefully, if you play your cards right and you get a little lucky, you can have the perseverance to hold on to a guy for the whole season.
Yeah, I've been there before. So let's talk about some of these guys. Let's talk about your bold predictions, because you do this every year, and I'm sure you've got another big batch of them here where you look to go outside the box of everybody else and set what you think is going to happen. I know you've got another batch of them for us here this year.
Yeah, I'll roll through a few real quick. Eddie Royal is a guy who I believe would be a top 40 receiver. He should be the number 2 in Chicago. Jay Cutler in tandem with Eddie Royal is vastly underrated. I think I have him as a top 14 quarterback. Jay Cutler gets a lot of flack, and a lot of it is deserved. But what people shouldn't give him flack on is that he is a pretty consistent 3,500 yards, 26, 29 TD kind of guy. That's kind of what he is. And so last year, I think around week 6, week 7, he and Philip Rivers were 2 top 5 quarterbacks. And then, of course, it all fell apart. But the point is, Cutler's a guy that you can get with Alshon Jeffrey in the late second and even early third round in some drafts, and then Eddie Royal in the 11th round, and you've got a pretty good nucleus for bargain prices. You have Alshon Jeffrey as probably a top 12 receiver this year, and Eddie Royal is about top 40, and Jay Cutler, I think, is the top 14. I'm not saying that you want to lean on that, but if you can then get amazing guys, let's say Le'Veon Bell in the first round, and then you're able to get, Odell Beckham Jr. in the second, or maybe even Jeremy Hill falls to you in the second, and you're piling up 4th, 5th, and 6th round a bunch of good players who are going to be good value. Man, if you just throw in with Jay Cutler and Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal and all those great elite players that you're able to pick up in the first and second, and some high upside guys in the middle round, that's not a bad strategy. On the flip side, I mentioned Frank Gore. I'm not a big believer in him. He's ranked 15th right now among running backs. I'm not a big fan of Tom Brady this year. Tom Brady, suspension's over. Everyone's excited about Tom Brady. This is the time to trade Tom Brady. Brady last year, I think it was week 6 through 9, he averaged, 4 or 5 touchdowns a game, something incredible like that in those 4 weeks. Every other week of the season, I'm not even counting week 17 when he played, 1 or 2 possessions and then sat out. But every other week up through week 16, he averaged 1.5 touchdowns a game. 1.5 touchdowns a game is not going to get you anywhere. That's a top 20 quarterback at best. So he had these 4 amazing weeks, but he was struggling a bunch of the times, and people don't remember that. They remember that he won the Super Bowl. So Tom Brady's another year older, and on passes beyond 10 yards last year, he was as good as Ryan Fitzpatrick, 48% accuracy rate. On passes above, I think it was 20 yards, his accuracy was about 25%. His arm is getting worse as time goes on. I know everyone's excited about Tom Brady because he's going to play all 16 games. I would say Tom Brady is one of the most vastly overrated quarterbacks in the draft, probably right alongside Cam Newton, whose numbers have continued to drop over the years and who doesn't have any weapons beyond Greg Olsen that are in any way reliable since Kelvin Benjamin went down.
Talk to me a bit about some of the guys, some of the sleepers that you're looking at this season that are going to catch some people by surprise, especially when everybody's going after the same guys in the first 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of the draft. Talk to me about some guys that you think are going to be perhaps well undervalued in the draft compared to the way they perform.
Yeah, Amir Abdullah is a good one out of Detroit. Joyce Bell's 30 years old, and he's run for 9 yards a carry the last couple of years. He's not the answer in Detroit. I think Amir Abdullah has a huge potential to be the best rookie flex player this season. I'm a big fan of a couple of number 3 receivers, Leonard Hankerson in Atlanta and Brandon Coleman in New Orleans, for the same reason with each other, that they each are trying to overcome number 2 receivers, Roddy White and Marquise Colston, who are getting older, are not playing as well, and are easily jumpable in terms of, what their skill set is today versus the upside of guys like Hankerson and Coleman. I think Andy Dalton is a hugely underrated quarterback. A lot of people are probably listening going, that is ridiculous, especially because he plays for Cincinnati, and I know some of your listeners from Cleveland. I get it. Andy Dalton was the 5th-ranked fantasy quarterback 2 years ago. Last year, A.J. Green was hurt a bunch. Marvin Jones, number 2 receiver, out for the year. Tyler Eifert, their very highly touted rookie tight end, out after week 1. They didn't even have Jeremy Hill participating much until week 9. Andy Dalton was playing with not with a full deck, and I'm not saying the mental state. I'm saying physically, he wasn't playing with a full complement of players. He was playing with the B team, and Mohamed Sanu was expected to pick up the slack. This year, they have really good players, healthy, ready to go. And I think Andy Dalton projected him out as a top 12 quarterback. And I'm backing that up by picking him in some of my leagues. Last one I'll mention real quick: Vernon Davis, another guy. 2 of the last, I think, 5 years, he's had about 900 plus yards and double-digit touchdowns. He's playing in a contract year. They didn't go to him at all last year. He was awful. And when someone's awful, that's the time that you got to pay closer attention. Were they awful because they're getting worse, or were they awful because they weren't utilized appropriately? And in the case of Vernon Davis, he's 31 years old. He was not utilized appropriately. They expect Vernon Davis to be a top 5 tight end this year. Anyone who's willing to take a chance on him at the end of their draft, because no one's taken him. I mean, he's outside the top 16 among tight ends. If you're willing to take a chance on him, you can thank me later. I've never been so confident about a tight end prediction as Vernon Davis being a nearly tight end this season.
How long do you think? Let's use that one. It's a good final one there. Vernon Davis. How late do you think in a draft most people can get away with snagging him?
Probably 13th round.
Interesting.
I'd say 13th. I've done a bunch of mock drafts, and I've done some real drafts, and Vernon Davis is there, for the taking at the end, anytime you want.
And you know what? One more. Looking at the quarterback position, is there anybody that is not in the equation to start at the beginning of the season that you think, hey, if you can stash this guy or keep an eye on this guy, that you think he will emerge before the season's over?
Well, it's funny because Kirk Cousins was a guy I started hyping up a month ago on my blog.
Okay.
And on Twitter. And at the time, Kirk Cousins wasn't on anyone's radar. It was RG3 who was going to be the starting quarterback week 1. And I officially dropped RG3 out of my top 250 ranking and put Kirk Cousins in at around the number 23 quarterback, 24th, 23rd ranked quarterback. What I was telling people was, if you're going to take a Washington quarterback, and you're in a 2-quarterback league, take Cousins with your last pick. I can almost guarantee you that he will start more than RG3 this season, regardless of what people are saying right now. And anyone who took my advice and picked Kirk Cousins with their last pick has a solid QB2 entering week 1. I think Kirk Cousins could be, easily a 24 to 26 touchdown quarterback with about 3,200 plus yards in that offense. Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Jordan Reed, et cetera. So it's people who are willing to anticipate that kind of stuff. That's where you make your money, in fantasy league. So Kirk Cousins is a big guy. Thinking about it, you might want to take a chance on the Denver backup, Brock Oldmeyer. I've mispronounced his last name, but the backups for Denver, Peyton Manning's going on 39. There's no guarantee. Yeah, there's no guarantee that he's going to last the whole season. And the backup looks very comfortable in that offense. And I probably should be going. I'm on family vacation with my parents, with my family and her parents. So maybe one more quick question, J-Rocc, and then I got to go.
Man. We're going to let you hit the road here for sure. But
cool.
I look forward to talking to you throughout the season. Next week we will catch up and we will get people ready for week 1 of some fantasy football as the season starts a week from yesterday, September 10th. You ready to rock and roll, baby?
Looking forward to it, J-Rocc. Can't wait to talk to you next week and see what's going on heading into week 1.
Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your holiday. BJ, we'll catch up with you next week with some more fantasy football for winners.
Sounds good, man. Take care.
You got it. That's my man, BJ Riddell, the guru. You guys can tweet your questions anytime, day or night, about fantasy football to at BJ Riddell, RUDELL, on Twitter, BJ RUDELL on Twitter, and he'll answer all of your questions right up until game time every week. And again, as I mentioned here at the beginning of this, we have 1 slot open in the Sports Fix Fantasy Football Challenge. You guys can get in with us. Send me a message on Facebook, on Twitter, at the Sports Fix CLE. Email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com. Say, J-Rocc, I want a shot at that final slot. We're going to draw 1 person and let them in. It's free of charge. And the winner of this thing at the end of the playoffs is going to get a custom championship belt from our good friends at Fantasy Jocks. Can't wait. Our draft, again, is coming up on Tuesday night, September 8th. And Monday, we will finalize the field and lock it in stone. Looking forward. We've got some fresh faces in this year's crew. We've got some longtime players in this one. It's going to be a lot of fun when the Sports Fix Fantasy Football Challenge gets underway. coming up here next week. Speaking of underway, Indians getting ready to get underway this evening with a 3-game set here. You've got the Detroit Tigers. Man, talk about trouble when you're trying to build some momentum. Here comes the team that's always been the Achilles heel for the Indians. Of course, this is not your daddy's Detroit Tigers. This isn't even last year's Detroit Tigers. The Tigers have struggled mightily this season. They come in this season 61-72 so far. Meanwhile, the Tribe 64-68. They had won 6 in a row before they lost a couple of tough ones here against a red-hot Toronto team. Really, the second game of that series could have went either way. Indians played well for the most part. Third game, not so much. Jumped on early. Really nothing a lot you could do. Although you did like seeing some appearance and some work there from Gavin Floyd for the first time there coming in to relieve Trevor Bauer. But the Indians now trying to bounce back. As we mentioned, if you want to believe that they are still a part of this, then hey, 30 games left and they're 6 games back, and 27 of the next 28 are against Central Division foes. It starts, as we said, with the Tigers. No Corey Kluber tonight, scratched with a bad hamstring. It's going to be Josh Tomlin taking the mound for the Tribe tonight. He'll be out there. Lobstein will be on the mound on the other side for the Tigers. The rest of the series, I know Sunday, it's still up in the air, although it looks like it's going to be Cody Anderson and Justin Verlander on Sunday. That one's going to be a 1:08 start. And Saturday, Tomlin moves up, which means Salazar will face Alfredo Simon in that one. And again, this is a big one as the Indians then move on to the White Sox. These are both teams that are cashing it in on the season, and if you've got any intention of making this more than just a token run for the playoffs, and I do believe that they can, I don't know what the final destination can be for the Tribe, but they can make some noise, and they can at least make this final month of the season very interesting for Indians fans to watch, and their chance to do that is tonight at home. They've gotten better at home based on that 5-game run they had there the last time they were here. They're still 5 games under 500 at home for the season. They've got to close that gap. Really, they've got to come out of these next 6 games here. They've got Detroit for 3. You've got the White Sox coming up for 3. They need to be 500 at the end of this. They need to take 4 out of the next 6. 5 of the next 6 here. Get themselves up there to 500 when these 2 series ends, and then, like Mike said, then we'll have something to talk about with about 24 games left at that point, and you're probably 4 or 5 games back, 2 or 3 teams in front of you there to jump. Now we can talk some business. Let's see. Detroit has always been the team that has said, no, Cleveland, that's enough of that right there. You're gonna sit down. So let's see if the Indians can pounce for once, be the team to pounce on the Tigers and hit them while they're leaking oil and plugging it down to the finish. That's what they're going to have to do to make this thing good. It's back at home. You guys get out there, enjoy the Indians and the Tigers this weekend. 17 games in 17 days. It's not going to be easy. 27-28 against the Central. They're 6 back against the second wild card, and they've won 9 of their last 13. You've got 2 guys in the top 5 offensively, Brantley and Kipnis, 2nd and 5th, respectively, in batting in the American League. Also, top 5 in doubles for both of them. Francisco Lindor, second half of the season has just been incredible beginning to that young man's career. The Indians sit with 4 of the top 10 starting pitchers in strikeouts in the American League as well. We'll see what the Tribe can do this weekend. We'll talk about it on Monday when Dan Wismar's here. We'll be previewing as well the Buckeyes, baby, as they head to Blacksburg and look to avenge that lone loss last season to the Hokies and Virginia Tech. They'll kick off the season on Labor Day. By the way, Labor Day weekend, you guys be safe and have a great weekend so you can get back here with us on Monday when Dan Wismar's in the house. We'll be talking about the first weekend of college football. The Buckeyes getting ready to kick things off. We'll finalize the field for the Sports Fix Fantasy Football League. We'll know the final, speaking of finalize, we'll know the final roster for the Browns and how they're going to go into the season, at least as far as the cuts go over the weekend here. Be able to talk about all of that and then some on Monday. Dan Wismar is going to join us. But don't forget, speaking of, let's not go too far into the future, tonight, the high school football game of the week, the Integrity Radio high school football game of the week. St. Ignatius Wildcats, Menor Fighting Cardinals, 13:30 a.m. WINTradio.com, or you can find them on TuneIn, 13:30 a.m. Listen to the broadcast pregame at 6:46 tonight. Kickoff for that one is going to be at 7 o'clock on the nose. It's going to be the Wildcats and the Cardinals. I'll be calling the action live from Jerome Osborne Stadium out there in Menor. Arnie Hamilton will be on the color commentary with me. Good weekend of high school football, college football underway. The end of the preseason football for the NFL. That alone is happiness right there. We got a lot to get into Monday. You guys enjoy your weekend, holiday weekend. If you like what you heard today, share the show. Jonathan Knight was great, sports writer extraordinaire. Mike Brandenberry in the middle, picking things up, talking some Tribe, and BJ Riddell, fantasy football for winners. Thanks to all of them for joining us. Thanks to you for joining us. We'll be back Monday. Dan Wismar, the Cleveland fan, will be in the house as well, and we'll kick off another week here. Same bat time, same bat channel, live, noon, across the Sports Fix Radio Network. We love you, Cleveland and beyond. You guys have a hell of a weekend. Enjoy your holiday weekend, and we'll see you Monday, baby, right here, live on the Sports Fix.
Survivals are my complete streets. We hustle, don't sleep. Out here in Cleveland, Cleveland, Cleveland.
Okay, now here we go. Welcome to the Cleveland show, but this ain't no cartoon. Reality is all we know. You're tuning in to Bravo. Yeah, you hear me everywhere, but it's only one of me. Let me make that very clear. Yeah, I'm from that terminal. You can see the lake from here. Faith in my teams, we keep getting closer every year. But we got the king, though, so hopefully we overcome. Yes, I have a dream, and I know I ain't the only one. Modell tried to steal my heart, but we brought it back. Thanks to Cleveland Clinic, now they call them kids the cardiac. Rock Hall, Science Center, Tower City, all of that. Warehouse District, Euclid Corridor, and all the flat. You know that I'm a Tribes fan, and I love Slimans. Crockett Park's the perfect place for me to spend some time in. Baby, this is Cleveland. It is so much more to us. You can even go to Severance Hall to see an orchestra. Hey.
We rep our city. Blue lights separate the grind from the gritty. We're sick-fitted. Hood pass cover any city that we visited. When we are from Cleveland, survivals are my complete streets. We hustle, don't sleep. Out here in Cleveland, Cleveland, Cleveland.
You know that I'm from
long nights, cold weather, it ain't nothing pretty. So much hate up in this city, bitty city. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Put your hands up in the air, everybody say yeah, 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 yeah.